Hello everyone. I have a small request. Please subscribe to the channel, like, and share your thoughts in the comments below. If you've enjoyed these tales, please consider turning on the notification bell to get notified whenever a new story is released. Thank you. And now let's dive into today's story. Jeed had always known suffering. It clung to him like a second skin, a shadow he could never outrun. Born into a family where poverty was the air they breathed, he had learned to live with hunger, shame, and hopelessness. His father, a struggling carpenter, had done his best to give his children a better future, sacrificing his meals so Jide and his younger sister Ijeoma could eat. Their mother had died when he was just 10, leaving behind an even heavier burden for their father to carry alone. Despite their struggles, his father believed in education. He worked tirelessly, taking on more woodwork contracts than his frail hands could handle, just so Jide could go to university. "Education is the only way out, my son," his father always said. Jide believed him. He studied hard, graduated with a degree in business administration, and stepped into the world believing that success was just around the corner. But reality was a cruel teacher. For 2 years, Jide searched for jobs, knocking on doors, sending CVs, and attending interviews. Each time the answer was the same: "We regret to inform you." He watched as his friends secured positions in big firms, flaunting their new lifestyles while he remained stuck in the same rundown apartment with peeling walls and a leaking roof. Then came the worst blow. His father fell sick. A terrible cough shook the man's fragile body, growing worse by the day. The doctor's words haunted Jide. He needs proper medical care, or he won't make it. But how could Jide afford that when he couldn't even feed himself? The frustration ate at him. One evening, as he sat outside their tiny home, staring at the dark sky, he clenched his fists and whispered, "What kind of life is this? Must I suffer forever?" The weight of helplessness pressed down on his chest. A voice interrupted his thoughts. "Young man, you seem troubled." Jide turned. Standing beside him was an old man in a long agbada. His eyes, dark and deep, held a knowing glint. "I know that look," the man continued. "It is the look of someone at the edge of desperation." Jide swallowed hard. He didn't know why, but something about this man made his heart race. The old man smiled. "I have helped many people in your situation, and I can help you too." Jide frowned. "How?" The old man handed him a small black bead. It was cold to the touch, unnervingly smooth. "Take this," the old man said. "Rub it on the heads of 5 newborns. Their destinies will become yours, and in return, wealth will follow you." Jide's breath caught in his throat. The weight of the bead in his palm felt heavier than stone. Could he really do this? His father's weak cough echoed from inside the house. His stomach growled with hunger. His dreams of success mocked him. And that night, Jide made a choice that would change his fate forever. Jide's heart pounded violently as he walked into the maternity ward of the local hospital, clutching a bag filled with baby supplies. His palms were sweaty, but he forced a smile. He was no longer Jide, the desperate job seeker. Today, he was Jide, the generous benefactor. The nurses greeted him warmly. "God bless you, sir," one of them said, taking the diapers and baby wipes from him. He nodded, keeping his expression neutral. His eyes scanned the room, heart thudding wildly. Babies lay in their cribs, their tiny chests rising and falling with peaceful breaths. Their innocence made his stomach twist. "I have no choice." He approached the first crib. The mother, exhausted from labor, smiled gratefully at him before dozing off. Jide reached down, his hands trembling as he gently rubbed the bead on the baby's soft head. Nothing happened. No thunder, no lightning, no screaming spirits. He moved to the next baby, then the next. By the time he reached the 5th child, his hands had stopped shaking. He had done it. He forced a smile and hurried out of the hospital, his chest tightening with guilt. That night, his phone rang, an unknown number. "Hello, Mr. Jide?" a voice asked. "We've reviewed your application. We'd like to offer you a business proposal." The next day, another call came, and then another. Within a week, Jide had landed his first business deal. By the end of the month, he had opened his first company. Within 6 months, he owned multiple businesses, his name whispered in high places. He had everything he ever wanted: but there was a cost. Every few months he needed to renew the sacrifice. Each time he returned to the hospital under the disguise of charity work. Each time he stole the destiny of another innocent child. And as the years passed, he silenced the guilt with money, luxury, and power. Jide's world changed the day he met Adana. She was unlike any woman he had ever known, beautiful, kind, and deeply spiritual. She ran a foundation for the less privileged, spent her weekends at orphanages, and prayed with a faith that shook the heavens. Jide was mesmerized. For the first time in years, he felt something real. Adana made him question everything. One evening, she held his hand and said, "Let's pray together." Jide hesitated. Something in him twisted. Adana closed her eyes and began to pray. As she did, Jide felt a tightness in his chest. Sweat trickled down his forehead. Suddenly, a rush of images flooded his mind. The babies he had sacrificed, their cries, the darkness that had followed him all these years. Adana squeezed his hand. "Jide, are you okay?" He jerked away, forcing a smile. "I'm fine." But he wasn't. That night, his nightmares began. Shadows whispered in his home. The faces of the stolen children haunted him. His businesses started crumbling. Deals fell through. Investors pulled out. He was losing everything. Desperate, he rushed back to the herbalist. "You must renew the sacrifice," the old man said. Jide's stomach twisted. For the first time, he hesitated. Jide sat in his luxurious office staring at the blinking red numbers on his laptop screen. Stocks plummeting, investments failing, businesses crumbling. His hands trembled as he massaged his temples. This can't be happening. For years, his wealth had multiplied beyond his wildest dreams. He had built a business empire from nothing, commanding power and respect. But now everything was falling apart. His phone buzzed. It was Adana. "Baby, are you okay?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. Jide hesitated before forcing a smile. "I'm fine, just business stress." "Let's pray together tonight," she said softly. "I feel a heaviness around you, Jide. Something isn't right." His heart pounded. Pray? For weeks, ever since he had met Adana, his nightmares had worsened. The babies he had stolen from haunted his dreams. In the silence of the night, he heard their cries echoing through his mansion. He needed to renew the sacrifice, and fast. That evening, he visited the hospital again, his usual bag of charity supplies in hand. His fifth sacrifice would reset his fortunes. As he walked through the maternity ward, he smiled at the nurses, masking the dark purpose that had brought him there. He approached a newborn's crib, reaching for the bead in his pocket. But then, Jide. The voice froze him in place. He turned slowly, his heart slamming against his ribs. Adana stood there. Her eyes were wide, disbelief washing over her face as she saw his hand hovering over the baby's head. "Jide," her voice broke. "What are you doing?" The air in the room felt suffocating. Cold sweat dripped down Jide's back. I can explain," he stammered. Adana's eyes locked onto the bead in his hand. A realization dawned upon her. Her lips parted in horror. "Oh my God, what have you done?" The word stabbed into Jide's soul. For the first time in years, he saw himself through her eyes, a man who had traded the future of innocent children for wealth. Adana took a shaky step back. "You stole their destinies, Jide. You did this." Jide reached out. "Adana, please, don't touch me," she snapped, tears spilling down her cheeks. A suffocating silence stretched between them. Then she turned and ran. Jide didn't sleep that night. He sat in his mansion staring at the walls, his mind racing. Adana knew. She knew everything. Would she tell someone? Would she report him? A gust of cold wind blew through the room, making the curtains flutter violently. Jide frowned. All the windows were shut. Then he heard it. Whispers. At first, they were faint, like the wind rustling through the leaves. But then they grew louder, filling the room surrounding him. "Give it back!" "You took what was ours." A cold hand brushed against his neck. Jide jumped up, heart pounding. "Who's there?" A shadow darted across the room. The lights flickered. Then he saw them. The children. 5 little figures stood at the edge of his bed. Their faces were pale, their eyes hollow, their tiny hands stretched toward him. "Give it back!" they screamed in unison. Jide clutched his chest, gasping for breath. His body convulsed as an unbearable weight crushed him. Then, in an instant, everything went dark. Jide woke up in a cold sweat. His head throbbed. His hands were shaking. It was time to fix this. He drove to Adana's house, his heart slamming against his ribs. He needed her. She was the only one who could save him. When she opened the door, her expression was unreadable. "Adana," he whispered, falling to his knees. "Please, help me." Tears welled up in her eyes. "Jide, you need deliverance." She stepped aside, revealing a man behind her, a pastor. Jide's blood turned cold. "This is Pastor Daniel," Adana said, voice trembling. "He can help you, Jide, but you have to let go of everything." Jide felt a dark presence coil around him, resisting. The pastor stepped forward. "Jide, do you want to be free?" Jide's lips trembled. The answer should have been easy, but could he truly let go? Could he walk away from all his wealth? Tears streamed down his face. I don't want to suffer again." Adana knelt in front of him, holding his hands. "Jide, listen to me. No wealth gained in darkness will last. This isn't real success. You have been a slave to something evil, but God can set you free." The shadows in the room thickened. A cold whisper curled around his ear. "If you leave, you will lose everything." Jide clenched his fists. He had a choice, redemption or ruin. Tears streamed down his face as he whispered, "I want to be free." The pastor placed his hands on Jide's head and began to pray. The moment he did, a piercing scream filled the room. Jide's body convulsed as something dark was pulled from him. He felt it clawing, fighting, refusing to let go. Then, silence. The weight lifted. Jide fell forward, gasping for air. For the first time in years, he felt light. But freedom came with consequences. He had to face justice. As the police arrived, ready to take him away, Adana whispered, "I will pray for you." And as Jide stepped into the patrol car for the first time in his life, he believed in something greater than wealth.